All right. Well, welcome to our first career chat of 2023. The interview, establish your brand and make an impression. We are so happy you could join us today. Understanding and communicating your professional brand in an interview will help you define your expertise, your abilities, your qualifications in a direct and impactful way, which can empower you throughout the interview process and really help you set yourself apart from all of your competition. Before we get started today, I do have a housekeeping detail. Please share any questions that you have in the Q&A box. If you cannot see the Q&A box, please select the More section and it will bring up the Q&A box. There's also an option within there to turn on live caption as well. We will get to those questions that you share at the end of the presentation. I do first want to introduce Heather Keenest, one of our senior career services advisors. Heather, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. As Maureen said, I'm Heather. I'm with the Career Services team at Rasmussen University. I've been with the university for 11 years, and I'm excited to be bringing this topic to everyone today.
Thank you, Heather. And my name is Maureen Weber. I am also one of the senior career services advisors here at Rasmussen University. And I have been working with our students and alumni for 9 years now. So finally, I do want to introduce Farah Jerome. She is our guest speaker today, and she can certainly talk about her role and what she does for Cleveland Clinic.
Thank you so much, Maureen. Thank you, Heather, Noah, all for inviting me here today. And thank you all for being here. My name is Farah Jerome, and I work as a university and higher education relationship manager, it's a tongue twister, for Cleveland Clinic. And in my role, essentially, I am your people connector. And what that means is that I connect you with our recruiters for meaningful opportunities, to connect you to your long-term careers at Cleveland Clinic, acting as like a mediator, right? We're a liaison to help simplify the application process. So really excited to speak with all of you and learning more about you and your needs, and hope to see some faces at Cleveland Clinic down the line.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Farah. We're so happy to have you with us today to provide our viewers with guidance and, of course, insight around this idea of developing a professional brand and carrying that brand into an interview. We're going to get into the how-tos as we move through the presentation today, but perhaps we should start with, how does branding work and what does it mean exactly for someone seeking a position in their field or perhaps even a new field?
So to begin, the simple concept of a brand is usually designed around a name, a logo, a tagline, unique products or services that you may be offering, or your packaging, right? We see things like Nike, Reebok, and we automatically know what they stand for, who they are. And it's said that a company creates a brand in order to leave a lasting positive impression of its products on the public. This is how companies distinguish their products or services from others, right? So, similarly, over the past several years, building your personal brand has become more popular with the growth of technology and social media. Harvard Business Review, for example, defines personal branding as how you define the distinctive value that you bring to your career. It's your uniqueness, your values, your reputation, and everything that you're seeing on this slide here. So, for example, if you were to follow me on LinkedIn, my personal brand is designed around my role as a people connector at Cleveland Clinic. I'm constantly posting about the people that I'm connecting with, the organizations, the students, prospective candidates, that sort of thing, right? So, just establishing relationships with colleges and universities, and again, connecting all of you to meaningful careers at Cleveland Clinic. And so therefore my posts kind of reflect that in some capacity. So this is how you want to start thinking about what your brand is. What are your skills and experiences? What have you accomplished? What are some of your goals? Your professional reputation and your images. Think about what sets you apart from perhaps your competition or competitors applying for the same roles, essentially.
Wonderful. So thank you for sharing all of those terrific insights and valuable information. Now that we've discussed kind of the nuts and bolts of what your brand is, let's talk about why the brand is important. You really want to give yourself a competitive edge. You want to stand out from the crowd of applicants. You need to demonstrate that you are the best candidate. Show that you're a good fit for what the employer needs. You must communicate your value to the interviewer. What do you bring to the table? Demonstrate that you have that special skill set that they are in need of and they're looking for. Because the person that receives either the job offer or moves on in the next phase in the interview process is the one that is the best at communicating how they meet the unique needs of that hiring manager. So, put quite simply, when a hiring manager has to decide between qualified candidates, your brand will help you stand out from that competition. It's also going to help you attract new opportunities. So, as Farah mentioned, if you have a really well put together LinkedIn account, recruiters are sourcing LinkedIn. So, they'll look through and they'll reach out to you with opportunities that they have. You also want to be able to control your narrative. It's your story, it's your journey, it's your career path, and only you know you the best. So you can determine what's out there and how you want to brand yourself and portray yourself in your career journey. So, Farah, what are some things that job seekers get wrong with their professional brand and the interview process? And what is the impact of a bad brand?
Absolutely. Great question, Maureen. So, to help answer this question, let's think about our purpose, right? What is your purpose as you start thinking about the career that you want to get into? Maybe you're looking for a promotion. What is your purpose for branding yourself? And I know the next slide will kind of cover this in a little bit more detail, but let's start with the root of that, your purpose. So, let's say as a high school graduate, you probably wanted to get accepted in different college programs. So, on your resume, on your career portfolio, you highlighted your skills, community service that you did, extracurricular activities that you did. In college, you probably want to land an internship or your first major career role. So you highlight projects, organizations that you've joined, other organizations that you perhaps worked at. And for those of you probably already in your careers, you may be wanting to make a major career move, switch industries, grow your business or your clientele. So you highlight your transferable skills and accomplishments. You highlight, how much money you saved the organization, for example. So you want to start with what your purpose is and what are you trying to accomplish, right? So with that in mind, some of the things that oftentimes people do get wrong when starting to think about how to build their brand is not clearly defining their purpose. You want to be clear and succinct. And if you're meeting someone for the first time, you have to be able to clearly communicate to them, providing your elevator speech, right? What your purpose is. Additionally, some of the things that people get wrong is not doing your research and putting in the work. You have to put in the work. What do employers want from someone in your industry? If you are an IT graduate, for example, you want to get into a data analytics role, right? What are some of the things that hiring managers in this industry, what are they looking at? Or what are they looking for? If you are a new graduate registered nurse, what are some of the qualities that nurse managers would want to see in a new graduate candidate, right? Who's your target audience? When you're advertising your brand yourself, who's your audience, right? Who are you interviewing with? Your director or the director, the supervisor of the department, your peers? Who's the target audience? And in your resume, you probably focus your resume on the career that you previously had and not necessarily the career that you want. I know oftentimes when I meet with students, often they'll say things like, I've never done this job before, or I'm moving into a completely different industry, right? So try to tailor your resume to the career that you want. Tailor your LinkedIn to the career that you want. Highlight those skills and those keywords. And again, we'll see some more later on, but start thinking about these things. Define your purpose, do the research, and put in the work. And these all, if you're doing it wrong, can result in either not getting the job, not getting the promotion, the brand deal, or the clientele. So again, start thinking about how all of these things can negatively impact your brand.
Awesome. Yeah, excellent. I love that idea of establishing that foundation. So defining your purpose, doing your research. It's really, really important. Now that we've established that foundation on what the idea of professional branding is all about and the significance of it, I think it's imperative that each person take time to answer some important questions when working out, how to figure out the steps to develop that brand, right? So, how would you encourage someone, Farah, to self-assess?
Yeah. So exactly what you just mentioned here, and even what we're seeing on this slide, self-assessing really means to do the work and figure out what are your strengths? What do you bring to the table? What are your values? What are your goals? Does your own personal value align with the organization's values, for example? What education have you attained? Courses you've taken and internships, projects you've done, your work experience, volunteer work. Let's start with these things in self assessing, writing it down. Here are some things that I'm really good at. Write it down because during the interview, you're going to want to mention those things as well, right? Know who you are, know what strengths you have, know your areas of opportunities where you can grow. Become an expert at something, right? If you're applying, and I'm going to refer to RN grads a lot because I work a lot with new grad RNs and helping the recruitment team get new grads. But if let's say you're trying to become a registered nurse, you just completed your degree, you're studying for your NCLEX perhaps, you want to find out again, what are the key qualities employers will be looking for, right? Self-assess, what values do I bring? How well did I perform during my clinical rotations? What did patients have to say about me that were positive, right? And that's how that all of that helps you to self-assess, right? And making a plan, create a plan. It starts there.
Absolutely. Yes. And I love how you talked about your values and do your values align with the organization's values? I often talk a lot about with students and grads, when you're preparing for the interview or even your cover letter, align your professional mission with perhaps the mission of the organization, right? So let's jump to the next slide, Maureen. Perfect. This is just kind of giving an individual an opportunity to expand that self-assessment, right? We often talk about action verbs on a resume. Many times I'm having to support students by directing them to some type of reference sheet or a list with action verbs to help them get ideas on how to begin creating those accomplishment statements on their resume. Well, when developing your professional brand, it's great to be able to identify 8 to 10 adjectives that define your brand and you're able to speak to. So this list by no means is an exhaustive list, but it's just designed to kind of give you that starting point to launch from when working to write things down, as Farah suggested, and developing that brand. This is, so take this list and you can expand on it. You can do some Google searching and look for other adjectives that might help to define who you are as a professional. Maureen?
Yes. So, I- let's get to the meat of the interview. You're now selected for an interview. You're in there. How can that brand really shine through in that interview? What types of things should you discuss during the interview process? And again, how will that brand really be a part of it? You're going to discuss your education and experience, and you're going to want to talk about what you learned, how you can apply it to the position you are interviewing for. You'll talk about traditional education, the degree you earned. You'll talk about any certifications that you've earned that apply to that position. Have you attended continuing education that's really important to that position that you're going to be that you're interviewing for? You'll talk about your work experience, any internships you've done, any clinicals you've done, externships you've been placed at, volunteer work, professional organizations that you've joined. You really want to mention your areas of expertise within the industry and then ones you will transfer into that new role. What comes to mind for me is customer service. What a great skill. It's useful in every position that you've held, and it can be transferred into a new position or a new industry. So think of those great customer service stories that you have that's been a part of your career. Leadership is another one. Maybe you've planned an event for a charitable organization that was phenomenal. Talk about that. Talk about the skills you used for that. Talk about the accomplishments. Maybe your employer, you have great attention to detail and you found a mistake and saved your employer some money. Talk about that. Talk about what advantages your employer received out of the great skills that you brought to your current career and what you're transferring into a new role or even a new career. You're going to want to talk about your work ethic, your skills, your strengths, your characteristics that make you a good fit for the role. And this is all what Farah mentioned in the previous slides that you did during your self-assessment. Now let's talk about it. Let's give examples. Again, talk about problem solving, critical thinking. Um, there's so many skills out there. Also, you're going to want to share information that will help the hiring manager remember you and relate the information that you're sharing to the position you're applying for. Some examples of that is maybe you're bilingual. Maybe you did a really awesome study abroad program. So these are all things to be thinking about. You went through those in your self-assessment and now you're ready to talk about them in your interview. So Farah, what should a candidate avoid saying in an interview?
Oh, such a great question because I've seen it in the interview process. I've seen it even when just meeting someone, right? We want to find out. We've heard a lot about what to say, but now what not to say. And before I answer that, if we can go back to the previous slide, I want to touch on that a little bit as well. Those brand adjectives, right? Which is kind of like a new term. We haven't heard about it much, but those brand adjectives essentially are used to help define your brand, your personality, your values, your aesthetics, right? They're carefully curated words. And I was watching a show the other day called Queer Eye, where these 5 individuals help people realize their worth outside of their family obligations, outside of even their careers, right? And one of the guys asked one individual, well, we'll call this man Eric, right? He asked Eric, who was pursuing his rap career, how would you describe yourself to the audience that's listening to you? It took him a couple of tries, right? It took him some time to really answer, come up with a few words to think about how he would describe himself. And finally, he said, I'm smooth and I'm powerful. And when he did, you can tell that it really stuck this time and it truly defined his stage name and his stage presence, his brand, right? So similarly, when people think of your name, your brand, your business, when you're in front of someone during the interview process, think about those words that come to mind. And I want you for me to think about maybe 3 words, each of you, right? As you're doing your research, find out what qualities hiring managers are seeking in candidates in your field or in your line of work, right? Use those 3 adjectives in finding your work, right? And again, as a new grad nurse, the nurse leaders are probably looking for you to be adaptable to changing needs. They maybe want you to be flexible. Maybe they want you to be collaborative. So think about those 3 things. And now answering the question, what should you avoid saying in an interview? You want to keep the information as relevant as possible. During the interview, it's really not the time to bring up anything that's not relevant or what you cannot do. Focus on the things that you can do, things that will add value to the organization, things that are part of your personal brand, right? I have seen, for example, resumes where people have added their hobbies, going to the beach, playing with my dog, going hiking. These are all great things. I love to be outdoors. You know what I mean? I love these things, but they're not relevant to the position that you're going to be applying to. They're not relevant to the job. There are even certain adjectives that people use are very cliche. I'm a hard worker. I'm punctual. Those things are going to be expected of you. How do you ensure that you're standing out during the interview process? How are you defining yourself, right? Even personal identifiers you want to stay away from. Things that can create biases, right? Like where you're from, how old you are, your marital status, how many children you have, and great things outside of work, but they're not relevant for the position that you're applying to. Again, focus on what you can do, the value that you will bring, and how you're going to become the best fit for the position. But prior to joining Cleveland Clinic, I was working in higher education, and I used to tell students one of the most important questions that you'll need to prepare for during the interview is tell me about yourself. This is your elevator speech. And that's what reels people in and want to get to know you more. You're essentially answering the question who you are, your background and skills, as we've mentioned previously, why you're applying for the role, and why they should hire you. Those three things is what you're focusing on during the tell me about yourself question. Not about what you like to do on the weekends. Those three things in 1 minute or less, of course. And I had one student went to an interview. They were asked one question and one question only. And it was that, tell me about yourself. And because we thoroughly prepared how to answer it, what to say, answering those three things, they ended up getting a job. So again, if I can really just emphasize, focus on the things that you can do and the value that you bring, and not what you can't do or has nothing to do with the job.
Wonderful. I love that advice and I love all the examples you gave. So helpful for our students and alumni. So now, can we talk a little bit about some tips for communicating the brand in the interview? So, how can our audience answer interview questions with confidence?
Yes. The first step is to prepare. You're seeing this on the slide right here. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Was it Benjamin Franklin said, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Again, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I had to prepare for this webinar today, right? I had to know what I was talking about before joining. So you want to make sure that you're preparing. First steps first. Making sure, again, we already went over how to personalize or self-assess, right? Writing the things that you're good at, making sure that you have your resume ready, know what's on your resume, know the value that you bring to the organization. So prepare, create those stories. Look up online even, questions that you may be asked during an IT interview, questions that you may be asked during an RN interview, questions you may be asked in an executive role. Prepare for those questions, right? Practice your delivery, speak confidently. I always tell people record yourself. Look at the questions, answer them, or have someone help you. Record it so that you can see what you look like, how you answer. This is all part of the preparation process. And of course, utilize your career services team because they are the experts. They're the ones that's going to help you really fine tune the interview skills that you're going to need, right? Communication, you want to articulate clearly, effectively. And again, when you record yourself, you get to see what mistakes you're making. We oftentimes, when we're speaking, use a lot of fillers like long pauses. You'll be able to see all of these things when you interview. I talk with my hands a lot. I am Caribbean. So that's one of the things, if I'm recording myself, I see it. If I'm doing too much, I try to bring it back in a little bit, right? But all of these things, bring your resume, your portfolio. Your portfolio really serves as proof of what's on your resume. So it's I guess like a combination of your resume, copies of any licenses and certifications that you have, honors, awards, publications, volunteer hours. There's a recommendation. I usually recommend maybe 2, 3 letters of recommendation from your instructors, from someone you've worked with in the past, right? All of that serves as proof of what's on your resume. Bring 2 to 3 copies. You never know who you're going to meet. I like to ask if I'm getting called for an interview, if they don't tell me how many people will I be interviewing with, so I know. But bring 2 to 3 copies just in case, right? And again, know what's on your resume because the questions that you will be asked will probably come from that. Be mindful of your body language. So again, if you record yourself, you'll be able to see if you have any nervous tics, if you're a tapper, if you are one who taps your feet, maybe twirl your hair a lot. You can see all of those things when you're recording yourself to better prepare for the interview process. Oh, Heather, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
I was trying to figure out a way we could get Maureen back. I think she had some internet issues.
no.
So, but that was the last slide in the presentation. I think Noah's trying to bring that up right now. We are on to some questions. You gave some fantastic advice, Farah, throughout this presentation today. And so we do want to start taking some questions from those that are attending. Again, reminder, if you have any questions, type them in the Q&A. If you're not seeing the Q&A, it's okay to use the chat as well. And we will certainly try to get to as many questions as we can. I know we talked a lot about professional branding and the interview and what that looks like and how that all unfolds. We also mentioned job search documents like your resume and your cover letter, right? And it all ties together. You brought up letters of recommendation, which I also think is very, very important. We had a few different questions come in about establishing a strong resume and the professional brand within the resume, but one in particular that stood out to me is they've seen a lot of resume templates, as we all see all over the place, right? And some that are very colorful and creative, some that indicate you should have your picture on your resume. They've heard a lot of advice that says, do not put your photo on your resume. And then a lot of advice around the design piece of the resume. What is your professional advice on that, Farah?
Yes, another great question. And you know what? At the end of the day, every organization is different. Having worked on a university side, I've seen where some of our employer partners, they require certain things on your resume, right? Again, going back to new grad nurses, they wanted to see clinical rotation information. They wanted to see volunteer leadership roles. All of your previous jobs, they wanted to see that. Some organizations didn't care. Here at Cleveland Clinic, we don't have a preference for what your resume looks like. But if you want to be on the safe side, if you're applying to multiple places as a, brand new graduate, my recommendation is use what they call like a plain text format. There's HTML, which has like a lot of the designs, the borders, the graphics. Plain text is just your words, your contents. That's the safest way if you're applying to multiple places to do your resume. Because at the end of the day, unless you're applying to a graphic design position, the graphics really don't matter much as the content. We want to see what you know, what you're good at, and not necessarily how many colors and borders are on your resume. The picture, not needed. The content is what's going to matter. So to be on the safe side, plain text format. There are a lot of templates out there, but make sure that you're utilizing one that you can easily change if needed. I've seen where people add, I'm looking to get hired at Mayo Clinic, but they're applying to Cleveland Clinic. So you want to make sure that, again, you're looking at that before you're submitting applications to multiple places. Again, know your audience, who you're applying to. Are you sending it directly to a hiring manager or a recruiter? Who's going to be viewing your resume? So again, while we don't necessarily have a preference, my recommendation, plain text format.
Okay. All right, let's jump back to the interview for a moment. I was toggling a little bit with the technical issues that we were having towards the end, so I'm not sure if you got into too much detail around this, but we had a couple of questions about questions at the end of an interview. And what common questions should people consider asking, especially if they feel like they get to the end of the interview and they don't really have any questions. Is it okay to say that?
Yes, and that's another great question. That's also part of the preparation piece. we have the internet at our fingertips nowadays, right? There's so many things that you can find. Find out what are some good, literally just Google, what are some good questions to ask for a data analytics role? Right? The
Right.
internet is at our fingertips. So always, always, always come prepared with, even if it's 2 to 3 questions, hiring managers love questions because it shows that you're engaging in conversation. It's not just them interviewing you, you're interviewing them as well. You're trying to find out if Cleveland Clinic is going to be a good fit for you, right? Before you even get to the interview, you're probably asking the recruiter some question. And those are some of the questions that you also want to bring to the table. What are the working hours that you prefer, or is there any flexibility, right? Get into even something more specific. I'm thinking again, new grad nurse. What are some of the challenges that new grad nurses have faced on this unit in the past, and how can I better prepare for it? If you do the
Great question.
preparation, maybe you know exactly who you're interviewing with, look them up on LinkedIn, right? If
Yeah.
let's say again, new grad nurse, if you're interviewing with a nurse manager who started as a med surg nurse and now they are the director of nursing for the entire organization, ask them questions about their journey. I see that you have 8 years of experience in the med surg. How did that prepare you for your current role as a nurse leader? Right? That
Mhm.
preparation helps you find questions even. But again, do your research. This is your chance. Find out more about the organization's work culture. What are some of the challenges employers who have left the role faced before they left? Were there any changes that maybe some employees suggested that were implemented? That lets you know some information about the culture of the organization. I also like to know the people that I'm interviewing with. So I'll ask them questions. How long have you been working for Cleveland Clinic? What do you love the most about working at Cleveland Clinic? Is there anything
Right.
that you could change? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, those are great questions. And
Yeah.
a lot of times people are so apprehensive to kind of get in the
Mhm.
weeds on some of that information. But as you mentioned earlier, you're interviewing the organization as much as they're interviewing you. And what better way to show the organization that you're really vested in this
Yeah,
process and you're so, so interested in them is to get into the weeds and get into those detailed questions.
exactly.
Um, and if you get nervous, well, minimally, you can ask ways that you can follow up after the interview. When can I
Exactly.
expect to hear back? Is there another, some of those really easy basic things that are go-tos if you start to get nervous or you forget what you're gonna ask. I also recommend bring a pad and a note or a
Yeah,
notepad and a pen with you. Write a bunch of questions down, and if some of them get answered during the interview, you can just, because it's okay to take notes during an interview.
exactly.
Yes? Yeah. Okay. Great. And now you mentioned the nursing piece. So a question did come through from one of our viewers. As an older nurse wanting to go into staff development after getting my MSN, what should I focus on? And I'm guessing they're referencing their professional brand.
Yeah, that sounds like, and again, whoever asked that, correct me if I'm wrong. So if, let's say, even if you're switching industries, right, you have a lot of good experiences as a nurse. You are working in a team, you're probably directing or providing instruction to the CNAs, the medical assistants, the LPNs. All of that is part of staff development when you have a team under you, right? What are some of those transferable skills, effective communication skills? I think Heather mentioned earlier, or maybe it was Maureen, mentioned customer service. No matter what industry you go into, customer service is so big because and here at Cleveland Clinic, for example, we're really big on the patient experience. We're really big on even the candidate experience, right? So think of examples of times when you really went above and beyond for a patient, above and beyond for a customer. And again, use transferable skills, things that you've done, your bedside manners, your ability to lead a team, your ability to adapt to changes. All of that's going to play a role in the role that you're going for. all of that.
Great. Awesome. Okay, a couple of other questions we have here. And I might pass. Maureen, can you hear us all okay? I know you were
I
having some
can.
issues
I'm
with the
back.
internet.
Yeah, I
Awesome. So glad you're back.
apologize.
No, that's okay. Technology is fantastic
It
until it
happened.
fails us, right?
Yeah.
So, we had some questions, some frequently asked questions from a number of people that came through about situations, situational questions that get asked in an interview. And I think I'm gonna toggle this between Maureen and Farah. Maureen, if you want to answer this first part, that would be great. When asked tough questions like, how do you handle a difficult situation with a coworker, or how do you handle a tough situation with a patient? What advice do you have for someone that might be surprised by a question like that?
Yeah, so I can start and Farah certainly jump in. But yeah, that's a very common question. How, and what they're looking for is how you handle conflict. And by conflict, we don't mean knock down, drag out fights. They just mean when you have a disagreement with someone. Maybe someone didn't show up for their shift, or maybe someone didn't do what they said they were going to do. How do you handle that with a coworker or with a customer? I mean, especially if you're working, wait staff, retail, you're up front with, right in the midst with customers dealing with all of that. So how do you handle that? And what they're looking for is your interpersonal skills. They're looking at how you communicate. They're looking how you can collaborate and how you can compromise. And they're looking to see if you can solve that without escalating it to a manager, and see how you handle that conflict and what solution you come up with. So when you tell a story, you don't have to give every single detail. You don't have to give names and dates and times, but you just want to give a general feel for what the problem was, how you came to the solution, and that everybody was happy at the end of that. Everyone was satisfied. The customer left satisfied, or your coworkers, you worked it out with your coworkers so the shifts were covered, and it all has a happy ending. So that's what they're really looking for in that conflict question.
Do you ever, Farah, recommend that somebody also add anything? Sometimes I've heard students, I'll connect with them after an interview, and students will grads will tell me, "Oh, I got so caught up in this conflict question, and I ended up answering it in a way that kind of ended a little negative, and I'm not feeling right about that." If you catch yourself in a situation like that, do you ever recommend to individuals maybe to just talk about what they learned around that conflict resolution
Oh my
experience?
goodness, yes. There's this formula that we often use in answering behavioral based questions. And the acronym is STAR, STAR. S for situation. Tell us about what was the situation. T for tasks. What tasks were involved? What did you have to do? A for actions. What actions did you take to help resolve this issue? Even if you're working in a team, what actions did you take? R for result. As a result of your actions, here's what happened and what I learned that I can apply now to this. Again, even if it's a different industry, here's what I learned in this particular situation and how it's going to apply now to me as an RN. Situation, task, action, results. That's almost like a surefire way to answer any behavioral question by providing an example and using this formula. And again, catch yourself if you miss a step. As a result, here's what I learned from it. Maybe the results weren't very favorable, but here's what I learned from it that I can change in the future.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for breaking that down. It makes total sense. Total sense. Because I think what an employer really wants to know is that you can recognize what you've learned in the end,
Mhm.
right? In any of your
Exactly.
experiences,
Exactly.
any of your previous employment, whether it's related to the field that the position that you're applying to now, or it's outside of that field. It's all about the learns and the professional growth.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have a few people that are asking you to please repeat the 3 key subjects for the tell me about yourself.
Yes. So if I can go back to it. So you're answering question, who you are.
Yeah.
That's one. Who are you? Talk about your education, your skills, your previous jobs, what you've done, the value that you added to the organization. That's one. Why do you want to work for this organization? So a few sentences. I would like to work for this organization because your core values of operating with integrity, safety, inclusion aligns with my values. All right. This is why I want to work for the organization. And three, why should they hire you? You should hire me because of these three key brand adjectives. I'm collaborative, I have effective communication skills, and I'm adaptable to learning new concepts.
Excellent. Thank
I
you.
love
Kimberly.
it. Yes, love it. Love it.
All right. What are some good questions that you? Oh, back to some more questions. What are some good questions that you, as the interviewer, Farah, liked it to be asked at the end of the interview?
Ooh, this is such a good question. Trying to think of if there's anyone in particular that I've heard that really stood out. And again, it's probably, how long have you been working here? What do you love the most about your job? What keeps you working at Cleveland Clinic?
Yeah.
What keeps
Yeah.
me here? Right? And that's an important question to ask because it will let you kind of know long term what the organization culture is like, what the department culture is like, the people that you'll be working with, because it's hard to lie about it's really hard to lie about your experience. I love working with these people because my leader is very supportive when needs be, right? She's very flexible. We're humans, we have emergencies. I've had a couple myself, and I had the opportunity to take a moment to myself or take a day to take care of my family obligations, which really is priority for me, right? What do you love the
Absolutely.
most about working here? What are some of the challenges that people in this particular role have faced in the first 90 days on the job? Those are really
Yeah.
great questions and really helps you to find out how the department functions, how they've pivoted, how they're implementing things, suggestions from that the staff members provide. You know what I mean? So yeah, try to think outside the box. And again,
Right.
Google's your friend.
Google
Definitely,
can be
Google
your
Yes.
is your
Well, and
friend.
and I like too when you ask questions like that because maybe you don't move on in that process. Maybe you aren't
Mm,
selected. But now when you go to the next interview, ooh, I know some good questions to ask, or I
great
know,
point.
it helps with your confidence as well.
Yeah,
It's a two-way street. It has to be
yeah,
a good fit for the candidate as well as the employer. So asking those really good questions really helps both parties.
yeah.
This is an interesting question that came in. I'm gonna throw this one at you, Farah, and you can
Yeah.
you can pick this one apart. How do you overcome misbranding? So
Misbranding.
so I'm guessing if you find yourself maybe not branding yourself exactly the way you want
Yeah.
to.
And you know what the beauty of life is? We can reinvent the wheel at any point in time. There is no, and listen, if there's an opportunity that you misbranded yourself for, maybe it really wasn't an opportunity for you.
Yeah.
And it will also allow you time to really fine tune that branding process for you. It really helps you go back to the drawing board to clearly define who you are, value that you bring. Because if you weren't able to do it before then, you probably wouldn't have performed well on the job. You can't clearly define your purpose, right? For example, so it gives you, allow you time and the space to go back, fine tune those things, be able to clearly and concisely communicate your value, your strengths, and on to the next. And opportunities are plenty. I know as job seekers, I've been there myself. As job seekers, it's difficult when you're applying to 200 jobs and you don't hear back. Maybe you are misbranding yourself. Maybe you are. But at least now you know, let's go back and plan. Let's go back to the drawing board. what is my value proposition? You know, what is in my summary? What job am I applying to? What are they looking for? Do I have those keywords on my resume? Did I miss those keywords? Are they asking for 5 years of certifications or experience and I only have 2? You know, these things, ask yourself these questions, right? And it really requires that you do plan. It requires that you're thoroughly reading the job descriptions. It requires that you're networking and connecting with people in these industries. And that's why tools like LinkedIn is so great because it allows you the opportunity to connect with people in your industry, ask them questions, find out more about their journey, you know? So there are just so many opportunities to rebrand. Think of it as a redirection as opposed to a misbranding, I guess, right?
Yeah, I related a
Redirection.
little bit back to the same idea of, you know, the conversation with a graduate who feels like they messed up in an interview.
Mhm.
Well, it's a learning experience, right?
Yes.
Everything's a learning experience. You can always improve on that for the next position.
Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah, sometimes it's just maybe you weren't meant to be in that position and there's something bigger and better around the corner. So keep working on developing the brand, keep working on improving and practicing your responses to interview questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Another interesting question that came in a little more specific to healthcare, so I'd love to hear your response on this. How do I develop myself as a consultant
Mm.
to healthcare organizations as a new professional with limited experience?
So the questions that automatically come to mind when I hear this is what what problem are you trying to solve? Consultants help solve problems. What is the organization's problem? Can you write it down on paper? What is their problem? How are you going to solve this? What steps are you going to take? Because when you're pitching yourself to this organization saying, here's the problem that you have, here's how I can solve it, you also want to bring, if you can quantify your experience in the past. So I'm trying to save you X amount of dollars. How I saved this last organization X amount of dollars. Here are the steps that I took. Right. So again, think about what the problem is I'm trying to solve. How am I going to solve it? Do they already have these steps in place? Have they already implemented them? If not, again, here's how you can. Right.
Right.
And I
Right.
hope that answers your question.
I think it's really helpful. I think,
Okay.
yeah, I wasn't, when I first read the question, I was like, ooh, I don't know if I'd be able to answer that one off the cuff. We're gonna just toss this
Hmm.
one to Farah.
It's a
All
great
right, so
question.
we've talked a little bit about the resumes. We had a question come in about what's your preference on a cover letter
Mm,
and how long?
yeah. Cover letter. I recommend no more than 1 page for a cover letter. Just like how I asked in the beginning, or you're answering the question, tell me about yourself. Same thing. You're answering those 2 questions: who you are, why should they hire you, or why do you want to work for this company? Those 3 things is what you're answering, like 3 little paragraphs,
Mm-hmm,
right? Maybe with an
mm-hmm.
action statement at the end. Here's how you can reach me if you have any questions. But those are the questions that you're answering. I recommend a cover letter because it is a very competitive job market right now. And while candidates really have a leg up in this job market, if we have 5 positions, let's say for new grad in the ICU, and we have 50 applicants, how are you going to stand out as one of the top 5? A cover letter, the resume is very objective. Here's my experience, here are my skills, here's my license certifications. The cover letter gives you the opportunity to share a story, even if you don't answer those 3 questions. Talk about why you decided to even pursue this role. Why did you want to become a nurse? What moment in time really piqued your interest the most in deciding that you wanted to become a nurse? What's your story? The cover letter gives you the opportunity to do that, whereas the resume doesn't. Again, very
Yeah,
objective. Cover letter, you
absolutely.
tell your story.
Yeah, yeah. And oftentimes you see when you go to apply a space that's specific for the resume and then a space that's specific for other documents,
Hmm.
right? And I always tell students and grads, if there is a space for it, you absolutely submit the cover letter.
Submit it.
Yeah.
You could have a, again, general template that you can just switch up for every job that you apply to. But yeah, just mention again those 3 things. Who you are, why you're applying for this specific role, why
Mhm.
they should hire you.
Great. All right. Well, we've gone through, okay, cover letter, resume. Yeah, we're down to a couple of salary questions.
Okay.
So what is the best way to determine your worth salary wise? And what is the best way to discuss the salary if you feel the offer is lower than you expected?
Great question. Money, money, money. We love money, right? In the past, I would say even 5 years ago, it was taboo to be the candidate and ask the question about the salary during the interview, but we're seeing it more often now. To
Mm.
really put yourself in a good position to get the most out of the organization, one is do your research. What is the average salary for this role in this particular area, for example, right? What's the average salary? Have a range in mind. I always say you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by just giving a number. You might be too high, you might be too low, right? Know what the average is. And once you get an offer, you have to be comfortable with getting even the lowest because that's the number that you gave. You have to be ready to walk away if they gave you the lowest of that range because that's the range that you gave. But no, again, have an idea of what it has to be realistic, right? This is why research is important. It has to be realistic. Know what range because they're probably going to ask you what are your salary expectations based on the role, based on the requirements, and the minimum qualifications based on my experience, X amount of years is where you quantify your experience based on these certifications that I've obtained. I'm looking to obtain this range, right? This is what I would be comfortable at. Is this within your budget? Sometimes I'll answer it is. Sometimes
It
they
is.
might hesitate and have to go back to the hiring manager. But have a range in mind and be comfortable with that lowest end, especially if
Okay,
that's what they give you.
so what you're saying is make sure that that low end is what you absolutely have to have in order to
Yeah,
walk away and say, yes, I can take this position.
yeah,
Is there such a thing as like ranging yourself out of a position? I know you said be realistic, but
yeah, absolutely. And that's going to depend on the organization's budgets as well. Larger organizations may be more flexible than a smaller organization, and that's just the reality. And that happens. So once you get an offer after the interview, they're going to tell you, here's what we're wanting to offer you. You don't have to say yes right away. You can ask them, how long do I have to accept this offer? I'd like to discuss this with my family, my spouse, my partner, whomever, right? I'd like to review it before making a decision. Can I have 48 to 72 hours is usually the, I guess, uh, general time frame that you
Okay.
have. Yeah, ask them about what, not, well, if let's say they give you the lower end of the budget and you not necessarily combat that, you want to come back and say, based on again my years of experience, is there any room for an extra 5, 10,000? Is there a room for an extra $2, $3 per hour extra? And you're the worst thing they could do is say no. That's the worst thing that could happen. And I've seen it with, again, new grad nurses where they're saying they have a set rate that they give usually new grad nurses, but I have 5 years of LPN experience. Is there any room for an extra $2 to $3 per hour? I've heard yeses. The
Well,
worst they can do is say no.
yeah, I love it because I love how you say they need to back it up. They need to do their research,
Mhm.
and they need, it's one thing to just ask for it, but have the reasons why. And
Exactly.
yeah, and really advocate for yourself, right? With that confidence, because you know your brand is out there and you know it's good.
Exactly. Exactly. Here's the value that I've brought to my organization. Again,
Yeah.
and this is where your portfolio comes into place. Proof is what's on your resume, proof of the value added. Here's
Mhm.
proof of what I've
Love
done.
it. I love it.
And would you say that there's a little bit of a difference between, well, I know that there's a difference between, but what are your opinions about developing a portfolio for a position in healthcare versus someone who might develop a portfolio for photography or design or marketing and PR?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, depending on the industry, for marketing, for videography, graphic design, these are very visual positions. You have to be able to showcase your work. If you're going to be an interior designer, I have to see interior design that you've done. You have a visual portfolio, pictures. If you have a page of testimonials, all of those serve as proof of your digital visual portfolio. For a position like a data analyst role, those visuals don't matter as much. The content, again, value added. If, let's say, you were featured in a newspaper about something grand that you did with your organization, of course, that's going to be important. Include that. But more so the content, the words are going to be more important for those roles, for a nursing role, than it would be for a videographer, graphic designer position.
Okay. Well, we have had lots and lots of great questions. And Noah, I believe Noah's going to be putting a survey link in the chat. And we'd ask everyone that's attending today to take a moment to click on that link and complete that quick survey. We would really appreciate it. And we want to thank you again, Farah, so much for being here today. I mean, the questions that came in were fantastic. Um, so much good information to share in regard to branding yourself as a professional and where it all fits, from the job search documents to the interview, following up after the interview, and just how you are putting yourself out there as as a professional. For students and grads that are online, if you have any questions, you can always connect with Career Services through the student portal. If we did not get a chance to get to your question today, again, thank you, Farah, so much for being with us.
Thank you
Yes,
all.
yes, thank
Wishing all of the
you.
students the best of luck on your journey. So thank you, Maureen, Heather, Noah.
Yes, thank you so much, Farah. Your expertise has been so valuable to everyone. Well,
All right, with
have a
that,
great day, everyone.
have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.